Welcome to Introductory Politics. Today, we are going over the basic bare bone structure of the US Constitution, what it means, what it looks like, various sorts of specifics that are found throughout, and overall, just talking about, again, this basic structure of the text. The first thing to look at here is the overall structure of our U.S. Constitution. Our U.S. Constitution is not the first. The current one that we have is not the first one that we have had. Our very first Constitution was called the Articles of Confederation. It lasted for a very short amount of time, especially relative to this Constitution. But our Constitution presents the, again, overall structure, the big kinds of laws, if you will, the big kinds of rules that in general we should not be changing or if they need to be changed, it requires a whole lot of people having to approve that, those sorts of things. So, for example, in this Constitution, one of the things that we're going to see is that there are certain powers of Congress. Those powers of Congress were established in the 1700s, late 18th century. And to give Congress additional power, one of the ways that we could do that is by adding certain amendments or by taking away some of their power through certain amendments as well. That's the very basic idea of what a constitution is supposed to do. It's supposed to be this overarching, generally never changing, or at least not always changing. If it does need to change, it is something that is really important, really significant. It is something that essentially almost everyone can agree with. And we'll see what that almost everyone looks like when we get to Article 5. But before we get there, this US Constitution is relatively short. It is in terms of, say, the number of words that are found in this Constitution. We're looking at between 8,000 and 9,000 words of the text. And compared to many state level constitutions, compared to some other countries' constitutions, our Constitution is very short. Does not contain a lot of really specific information throughout, but does contain some very, very specific things, especially at the beginning. This quick overview of the Constitution does tell you essentially what is found in each article. There are 7 different articles of the US Constitution. The first 3 generally are considered to be kind of the most important, the most fundamental parts of the Constitution that set up the 3 different branches. Article 4 is going to deal with certain issues that deal with kind of the relationship between states to other states, states and the federal government, that sort of idea. The 5th article contains the process to change this document. This is, again, a rigid document unless we change it. And in order for there to be any change, there is a very specific process that it has to go through. Article 6 is going to contain what I just have listed here as miscellaneous things. There are certain things that we're going to see that are found in Article 6 that just don't really fit anywhere else. So we'll see that sort of stuff there. And then Article 7 is a very quick one on ratification. When it comes to Article 1, Article 1 on the legislative branch has 10 different sections. And when it comes to those different sections, each one of them has a different focus all within the legislative branch. So Article 1 is going to create a Congress. We call our legislative branch a Congress. There is nothing necessarily special about that name, Congress. We just call it a Congress. But the Congress of the United States is the legislative branch. And so Article 1 is going to say in Section 1 that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. The very first thing that Article 1 is going to do is unpack this concept called bicameralism. Bicameralism is the idea that there are 2 different chambers in our Congress, in our legislative branch. So we have the House of Representatives, which is one Congress, if you will. And then we have a Senate, which is a second Congress, in a sense. Now, these 2 are both part of the same institution. So we have one Congress with 2 chambers. We have a bicameral legislature. And so there are certain kind of advantages and disadvantages to having a bicameral legislature. That goes a bit beyond the scope of this particular course, but overall, one kind of example of this is having a bicameral legislature makes it more difficult for legislation to become law, makes it difficult for a bill, more difficult for a bill to become a law, which means that in general, for a bill to become a law, you need to have more support from more people, which means it is harder for, say, one smaller group of people to be able to kind of run the show. And so this is one of the advantages of bicameralism. One of the drawbacks, though, is at the same time, it makes it very likely to stall. Makes it very difficult to do anything at all at some points in time. And so that's bicameralism. We have a House of Representatives and we have a Senate. When it comes to the House of Representatives, the Section 3 is going to talk about how we essentially choose who gets to be representatives. One thing that you may know is that the United States federal government is considered to be a representative democracy, republic. These different kinds of words, concepts, phrases are somewhat interchangeable, but the idea that we have a representative democracy. People in the United States vote for representatives to essentially vote to then make rules that apply to all of us instead of us ourselves making those rules. And so when it comes to that bicameral legislature, we get to elect members of the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives, we often call the lower chamber because they are, in a sense, more closely tied to the people. They represent fewer people on average than, say, senators do, that sort of thing. But when it comes to the selection process for the House of Representatives, Article 1 is going to say that that the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states. Again, we choose who our representatives are going to be. This is by the people of the several states. They are chosen by the people of the several states. We get to elect our representatives in the House of Representatives. This other phrase, chosen every second year, this identifies the term, the length of the representative's term. So when it says that members are chosen every second year, what this means is that each member of the House of Representatives serves a 2-year term of office. The next part here of Section 3 for you to pay attention to has to do with the qualifications. Who is able to be a member of the House of Representatives? No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state in which he shall be chosen. There are 3 basic qualifications to be a member of the House of Representatives. You have to be at least 25 years old. You have to have been a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years, and you have to live in the state of the people that you're representing. That's the very basics of the House of Representatives. When it comes to the next component of how these representatives are elected, there is a very big concept here, which we will get to later in this course, which has to do with apportionment. So when it comes to apportionment, what Article 1 is going to say is that there is a specific kind of process to determine how many representatives each state gets. That's essentially the definition of apportionment, determining how many members in the House of Representatives each state is going to get. And so, for example, Article 1, Section 2 is going to talk about apportionment by saying representatives shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers. This basic idea here is the idea of representation being based on population. So if one state has 50 million people that live there, you would expect under these big rules that that state gets more representatives than, say, a state that only has 25 million people in it. And so this kind of makes sense. The bigger the state, the more representatives, the more representation that those people get in that House of Representatives. When it comes to the upper chamber, what we call an upper chamber is commonly the U.S. Senate. So Section 3 is going to shift to moving away from the House of Representatives to the Senate and talk about essentially the same kinds of things that Section 2 does with the House of Representatives. And so when it comes to the Senate, we're going to see the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. This is a little bit different than what we see in the House of Representatives. Just above, one of the things that we can see is that when it comes to how many representatives each state gets in the House, that's based on the population in that state. When it comes to the Senate, the state's population doesn't matter. And so when it comes to representation in the Senate, each state gets equal representation of two senators per state. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of two senators from each state for 6 years. This is for a term of 6 years. So again, representatives in the House, they serve a term of 2 years before they are up for re-election. Senators serve a term of office of 6 years. Then, no person shall be a senator who shall not have attained to the age of 30 years and been 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state for which he shall be chosen. Again, we have the same idea here as we saw with the House. We have the qualifications of U.S. senators. They are the same three qualifications as we saw in the U.S. House of Representatives. There is an age qualification, a citizenship qualification, and a residency qualification. However, contrary to the House, the qualifications are a little bit stricter. For the House, you just have to be 25 years old. For the Senate, you have to be 30 years old. In the House, you have to have been a citizen of the United States for 7 years. For the Senate, it's 9 years. And this last one, the residency requirement, you have to live in the same state as the people you represent. That is the same for both the House and the Senate. Article 2. Article 2 is going to talk about the structure of the executive branch. When it comes to the structure of the executive branch, Article 2 is going to do a lot of the same kinds of things that Article 1 did for the Congress. It's going to set out, say, the terms of office, how that person is chosen, and how long, what their qualifications are. And so we're going to mention these same kinds of things here. When it comes to the President of the United States, the President of the United States serves a term of office of 4 years. When it comes to the qualifications for office, the President must be a natural-born citizen at the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. The President of the United States, in order to be President of the United States, you have to be at least 35 years old. We have that age requirement again. We do have a citizenship requirement, a natural-born citizen. This one is a bit tricky. When it comes to the natural-born citizen requirement, we commonly think of being born in the United States, and that's perfectly accurate. However, there are two different ways of thinking about natural-born. Under U.S. in legal interpretation, the idea of what it means to be natural born falls into one of two categories, or both. You can it can apply to both. One is again being born in the United States. If you're born somewhere within the 50 states, for example, and additional territories as well, then you are considered to be a natural born citizen. However, if you are not born in the United States, you can still be considered a natural born citizen. And the way that that works is if one of your parents, it doesn't have to be both, but if one of your parents is a US citizen at the time of your birth, then it doesn't matter where in the world you are born, you can be born, you can be considered a natural born citizen. So in some instances, you can be born outside of the United States and still be considered natural born, as long as one of your parents is a U.S. citizen when you are born. The residency requirement, our last one here, again, there is a residency requirement because we're not representing a state, we're representing the entire country in a sense. The residency requirement is a U.S. residency requirement of 14 years. When it comes to Article 3, the judicial branch is Article 3 is one of the shortest articles of the U.S. Constitution, especially ones dealing with different institutions. It's very, very short, very, very vague when it comes to understanding what the courts do. And so we don't spend much time here talking about the courts, at least in the Constitution, because of the limited number of words that are given to us. But for example, Article 3 does say that there will be one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. There are lots of different federal courts. We commonly think of the U.S. Supreme Court as the main federal court, which in a sense it's true. That's true, and that is the highest court that we have in the United States. But there are lots of other federal courts underneath that. We have some appellate courts. They're called circuit courts or courts of appeals. We have district courts at the federal level. We have bankruptcy courts and tax courts and all different kinds of courts that are all considered to be part of the federal judicial branch. So when it comes to what those individual courts do, there are some differences because some of them are unique, more unique courts. However, overall, the language of the Constitution does give us some semblance of what these federal courts do. The federal judicial branch, the power, the jurisdiction of our federal courts, shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made. The basic idea here is that anytime there is a legal disagreement, courts have the ability to answer those legal questions arising under this Constitution. So, how is something, one of the things that we're going to see in the First Amendment is the protection of free speech. Does Congress violate your free speech in this particular situation? Under the laws of the United States, what do the laws of the United States mean? Did someone violate the laws of the United States? How does all that work? And treaties made or which shall be made. These are treaties, think of as international agreements. And so here we're talking about when it comes to federal judicial power, we're talking about legal disagreements that deal with language found in the US Constitution and language found in US, say, congressional law or in international treaties that the president may make with Senate approval.